Canadians should be familiar with them, but certainly Canadians know McLuhan and know the history of McLuhan and Innes, that the big premise that technology changes the very way we think and the very way we do our business and thinking. And so we'll hear from LISS-Jeffrey on this topic.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm not going to get up because, alas, I have an injury which prevents me from getting up. But what Dwight said was absolutely true, and that is I am preparing a report on our conference. So if you have observations or thoughts that you think are not quite getting through, please come up and talk to me privately so that we can have a very full reflection on Igloo, on what should be happening with a redesign, if that's desirable. What should we pull off with a network of networks on innovations in global governance? So I have a very independent mind, and we can take issue later, okay? And,
no, take it now.
I'll hang on for a second. Actually, what I wanted to do was start with an inspirational quote from Albert Einstein, because this now is animating all of my work. And that is, Einstein said, and I want to thank Dwight and Juanita and all those, including Howard, who may have wondered, where is her PowerPoint? What is she going to be talking about? But if you know me, you will know that we independents are a little hard to manage. All right, now, my inspirational quote from Einstein. Einstein informed us that we can't solve the major problems that face us by using the same kind of thinking that got us into those problems in the first place. I wholeheartedly agree. And although I'll speak from a McLuhan and a media ecology perspective, because that's the whole movement that McLuhan spawned, media ecology, despite that fact, I think that we have to shake up our concepts. Now, I think Tad Homer-Dixon got us off to a good start. I hope this panel carries on that work, and I'm greatly looking forward to what everybody else has to say as far as shaking up the fundamental concepts with which we are approaching questions of global governance, but also this whole business of, here's my first one because I hate PowerPoint too. Okay, but anyway, I will use a little bit of it. The way we're approaching the question of a new world order. Remember, there was a lot of talk about a new world order way back when. There was a great political debate that was extremely important. Now, the terms in which we are discussing the new world order tend to be couched in phrases like the shift from government to governance. Now we're talking about something a little different. And now, with the financial meltdown and with some of the other events that are facing all of us that are far too complex for one individual to simply understand and attempt to tackle, it is now time, it seems to me, that we seriously ask ourselves, how are we going to get to that next stage where we are shaking up those fundamental concepts? So my first point is really, anybody who's got good ideas on that one, how we're going to get out of the thinking that got us into the problems we're facing now, I would suggest those are the types of conversations and deliberations that we need to be having at this point. Now, not even sure what I put on this.
Well, let's do discovery.
We'll have to see. That's right. Okay. So, let's see. Wow. All right. I'll tell you what's happened here. Because, well, there he is, Marshall. Here's whoops. I'll just hang on to that for a moment. I'd like to introduce a couple of quotes from McLuhan. And remember, you're going to have to give me a flag when I've got about 2 minutes. And don't give it to me yet, please. Okay. With Marshall McLuhan, I introduce, I hope I don't come cold and clean to this introduction, but Marshall McLuhan, the great Canadian communications theorist. I'm not talking about the McLuhan who was considered to be a technological determinist. Those of us who are serious McLuhan scholars don't believe that that holds any water. But what we would like to point out is that we're not, and this is particularly relevant, I hope, to this panel, we are not simply talking about specific one-off technologies, whether those are the huge interconnected technology like the internet, or whether it's television or video conferencing or whatever it happens to be. That's not the point. The point is that when we introduce new media, particularly new media that become dominant, what we find is that we change the very environment in which we live. This was one of McLuhan's fundamental contributions. Alan Kay, the great inventor on the computer side, used to boast of how his mind had been changed from considering the computer as a tool that allowed things to get from the sender to the receiver. Remember the old Shannon and Weaver? Instead, he said, upon reading McLuhan, I understood that computers needed to be approached as environments in which we lived, as McLuhan loved to say, often as unconsciously as the fish in water. But McLuhan didn't stop there. His point was that we had to wake up and be aware of some of the changes in behavior, changes in institution that in fact come about as a result of changing environments. In fact, McLuhan's next great quote that I will introduce, I'm sorry, I didn't get all this typed up here, but his next great quote, and I will speed along after this, is simply, we can't understand cultural, political, and economic change, particularly dynamic, huge, world order changing type changes. We can't understand these changes unless we have a knowledge of the way media work as environments. All right, so am I going to get stuck in the technological deterministic trap? By no means. It seems to me, hitting some of the highlights that have come out of our research, which I'll contextualize a little more properly in a moment, it seems to me that if we look around and ask ourselves for the major change, we will in fact look to generation and look to, as Don Tapscott likes to put it, look to the fact that we have digital natives and digital immigrants, and they are very, very different. Now, it's not just an age divide. For some of us in this room, this may come as slight relief. Not just based on age, but based on fluency. Not even just literacy. The fact that I know how to do email and in fact can set up a netcast rather handily, that's not it. But it's a change in our mindset, in the very concepts that we use when we approach the study of change, the understanding of how the dynamics of our world, in fact, are changing. Well, I guess I've also given away probably the second key insight. And come on, this is not news, but I think it's fundamental to what we're trying to understand in order to consider a question of redesign of Igloo. What is the second key change that we need to pay attention to? And that, I would argue, is that change is the only constant. Okay, again, I'm not bringing the news here, okay? But I do think that if you look at some of the most interesting ideas that are being proposed now, the people who are really trying, whether it's on governance, whether it's on some of the things that Tad Homer-Dixon was talking about this morning, we are looking at ways of interpreting and understanding change. We have to. This, in fact, is the only way in which, I would argue, we are going to be able to discern some of those shifts that have come about and that aren't resulting in a kind of new world order, but instead are bringing us to what I would argue, thanks, the threshold of the significant changes that we must pay attention to in order to make our design shifts. Third, and again, I'm drawing on McLuhan here, I'm drawing on some of the more influential and interesting, dare I say, people who I believe are looking at our changing world order and the dynamics that are driving those changes. Next, I would have to point to the emergence and rise of what we loosely and often glibly, I would say, call civil society and civil society organizations. The fact that non-state and non-governmental actors are able to get to certain tables, are able to be part of certain agendas, it seems to me, without a doubt, is one of the most significant developments of our time. So again, I'm not bringing the daily news here, but I am, in fact, I hope, reminding us of some of what I think we need to pay close and serious attention to. If you haven't yet had a chance, you might want to just take a look at Paul Hawkins' book called Blessed Unrest. And what Hawkins is doing, it's like a telephone directory, part of it at the back, because what he is doing is identifying many of the civil society organizations, talking about them, talking about their impacts, and then raising this question, which is the same one the Queen raised about the financial meltdown, and that is, why didn't anyone see this coming? With all the smart people that we are in this room, and others, how come these developments have appeared to come out of nowhere? Now, the one other that I would add to the Queen, whose comment I cite to you for your amusement, but also I think for all of our attention, when the Queen said, it almost, I mean, it sounded so innocent, I just loved it. She said, now, with all these smart people paying attention to the economy and making so much money, why is it that no one predicted this? happening as it did happen. Similarly, what? The image that haunts me on the planetary side is the one about a strange and unidentified insect being found in Canada's north by some of our Inuit people. And they couldn't figure out, what is this? They'd never seen it before. Lucky Inuit, you know what it was? It was a mosquito. They'd never seen one before, because prior to their version of the meltdown, in fact, mosquitoes had not managed to make it that far. Now, because Dwight may be wondering how I have chosen to go off on this particular tangent here.
You better wind up.
Yeah, I will. I just want to show my turbulent triangle. Whoops, where's my, whoops.
I think you had
I
it
saw it
earlier.
a moment
You
ago,
had it
so I
earlier.
know it's here.
There.
There, okay, sorry. I just wanted to put this up. It should go with the civil society side, but this was prepared by a team that I led for the Council of Europe. And what we were doing, in fact, was just trying to look at the shift from government to governance. And this was our simplistic way of simply saying, they're new partners who need to be factored in. That's all. Government, private sector, that's fine. This has been the way for quite some time. But the civil society JAG and the citizens and the encirclement of the entire triangle by media and the sense in which inside this media sphere exist these various groups, and in fact without paying attention to the way media in fact are reconfigured by these various groups, we will have no way of grasping the kind of complexity that Tad Homer-Dixon was speaking about, and that Igloo appears to be a counter environment for. Now, I will have lots more to put on our collective Igloo site, so I do hope that my presentation serves, one, as a way of introducing myself to you, so that you may come up and approach me and give me some idea of what you would like to see in this report. I'm here really as somebody who does theory and practice and a hybrid, who has built many websites and platforms, but I'm here to really see where we are now going, what we think is missing, so as to attempt to share that with the Igloo designers, directors of the project. I will also add that my other set of slides, my group is in the middle of preparing a book. In fact, that's what they all say, right? But in this case, it happens to be true. A book of our experiences 1997 through to 2006, and just going over what was happening then in an attempt to compare our experiences to those of the Igloo project. The final point is simply that the comparison reaches a rather striking conclusion. Both of us believe, as we look back on our experiences, both of us believe that we've spent too much time focusing on the technology and too little time focusing on the social practices, how you build those communities, or how you draw in those communities and encourage them to come in. I realized when I got to about .80 on the things we had learned, the lessons learned, that in fact my attempting to tell the igloo story had been a non-starter. But at number 80 of our lessons learned and how we could mine it, I realized that even coming up with an image of organization such as one we arrived at, which was the constellation model, flattened like Thomas Friedman talked about, even that was not going to take away from the fact that what we needed to do here today was take from what each of us has learned in our experience, share that here, and go forward, I would argue, with how to do a redesign of this, what, upon reflection, to me is a very, very important project. Thank you.
Thank you.